Have you heard the term house poor? I've heard the term house poor. What house poor is it's when you get into a mortgage that is so expensive for your lifestyle that you're basically in your house eating top ramen every day, praying that you get a raise so that you're no longer house poor. Do you want to know the quickest route to becoming house poor? Getting max qualified and going with that number. Yep. So a lot of people think, oh, well, a lender won't get me into trouble. And lenders don't try to get you into trouble. It's just there's guidelines, there's numbers, and there's rules. So we're always looking at the guidelines, numbers, and rules. And some lenders take time to talk to their clients about short-term, long-term financial goals, which myself and my team always do. You know, we walk through every single number to make sure it's something someone can afford, because when I was 26 and I got my first house, I ended up house poor. So it's a very sensitive topic to me, and I really try to protect my clients. So here's the deal. As a lender, depending on the loan program, we can qualify you up to 55% of your gross income. So what that means is that if you make $10,000 a month, I can use up to $5,500 for your housing as well as everything on your credit report. Now you're like, oh, well, that's like half, that's fair. Think about it. So that's your gross. That's before Uncle Sam gets his cut and your state gets their cut. So let's think about it. Federal taxes, California state taxes, Medicare, Social Security, health insurance, eye insurance, dental insurance maybe. You know, there's a whole list of stuff that gets taken out of your paycheck. I mean, I think every single American who's ever gotten a paycheck, we've all looked at it and been like, really? Really? So what you really want to do is you're going to want to look at your paychecks before you talk to a lender. And if you don't have a budget, I would suggest doing one. I understand budgets are a nightmare and can be a pain, but you want to do this before you get qualified for a loan, because it's super important that you understand what you're comfortable with instead of assuming that the lender is just going to magically come up with the right number. So 55% is not where you want to be with your debt to income. I'll tell you that right now. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to do the budget, figure out what you can afford. So if your rent is, let's say, $2,000 a month and your new mortgage payment is going to be $4,000 a month, you really need to look at your finances to see if you can accommodate that. So as a lender, there's certain things that are not in our calculations that can be huge monthly expenses. An example of that would be daycare or private school. We're not calculating that in. So if I bring you up to 50% on the debt to income, keep in mind, I'm not putting those things in there. So you may end up in a position where it's like, do the kids go to school, the private school we have them in, or do we eat, right? And then in other circumstances, you know, depending on what your taxes are and everything else, at 55% debt to income, I mean, it's tight. It's not where you want to be. Like, I always tell people to try to stay under 40% if they can. You know, the only exception to that would be like if there's a spouse that's not on the loan that has income, or if there's some other source of income coming in. So as a buyer, the last thing you want to do is say to a lender, what is the maximum I can qualify for? Okay, because if you go with that number, you're going to end up house poor, and you don't want to do that. Trust me, it's brutal. Brutal. Okay, if you're doing an online application type thing, hopefully you're working with a company where you can talk to a person, because you really need to talk about this stuff. You can't assume that house is going to change you. Okay, and a lot of people assume that. I hear it every single day. They pay $1,000 a month in rent, they have no savings, credit card debt, but they think that when they get this house, suddenly that's all going to change. Their payment's going to go up to $4,000 and it's not going to be a problem. But historically, there's never been that extra $3,000. So please don't get max qualified. Make sure you look at your finances too. Make sure you work with a lender who's going to take the time to talk to you about your short-term and your long-term financial goals. Purchasing a house is a really big deal. And I think sometimes when you're in the process, it can just feel like, oh yeah, I'll just get a loan, I'll just get approved. And like, it's not really thought through. It's like, oh yeah, the lender will tell me. You want to look at it yourself as well. Okay, this is your money and you need to protect it. So if you want to learn how to calculate your debt to income, that video is going to follow this one. I appreciate you watching. Thanks.